Welcome to Maritime SoftwareHub, the People Podcast. Really excited today because we've got my colleague Daniel Duggin is speaking to Cynthia Worley, who's the VP of Strategic Accounts at SEDNA. Really interesting to hear Cynthia's background and also to hear her kind of transition from predominantly a technology background into technology within maritime, and also to understand a bit more about SEDNA solutions and their story as well. So I'm very conscious that over the last 5 or 6 episodes we've been very male heavy, and Cynthia's the first female we've had on the podcast, so really excited to have her on board and also to hear a bit more about her kind of perception of women in shipping. We've got International Women in Shipping or Women in Maritime Day coming up next week or so, and it's a subject that I relate closely to because my mother was a shipbroker for a good 10 years or so back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I've really seen kind of firsthand how difficult it can be, to be honest with you, to be a female in the maritime world, particularly in certain roles. So for example, in the sale and purchase shipbroking role, it can be quite tricky. And there weren't that many females around at that time in kind of prominent sort of broking positions and similar type of fields. So I really kind of was really impressed with Cynthia's background, and also on my family side as well, seeing my mother's how well she did. So I hope you enjoy this episode. We're going to run through a few details related to women in shipping, but also dive into the role of VP of Sales, talk about that within SaaS and within that type of environment. So I hope you enjoy and look forward to speaking again soon.
Welcome to the Maritime SoftwareHub podcast. Today I'm joined with Cynthia Worley, Vice President of Strategic Accounts at SEDNA. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cynthia.
Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here.
Great. I know you're a very busy person, so we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. To start off with, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself to the listeners and also tell us about your career working across maritime and maritime digitalization. So how did you start your journey into the digital shipping space?
Fantastic. Well, thank you. You already said it. I'm Cynthia Worley. I'm Vice President of Strategic Accounts at SEDNA. Really happy to be here today, so thank you very much. How did I get in this space? It's kind of one of those happy accidents, I think. For the most part, I would say it's a little bit predestined. You know, I was always a little bit of a technology nerd, but not so much related to the maritime space. Okay. I actually credit my dad with kind of leading me into technology. He was the dad who would buy a new computer system, a new TV, a new stereo set, and I had to put it together for him. And when you're a little kid, right, it's kind of an adventure, or at least it was for me. I loved connecting things. I loved turning it on and it not actually working, you know, and then you've got to problem solve. You've got to figure out, what did you connect them properly? What can you tie to what, input and output? So yes, I think my dad gave me a real passion for putting things together and working out problems that I've been lucky enough to transition into my career.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that's very much the case today. I think a lot of parents give their kids the technology to go and explore and take all the sort of pressure out of doing it themselves. But what's great is that you've got from that is the problem-solving side of things. And I think this really strongly fits into SEDNA. So what I say, how is your sort of digital journey within shipping? How does that translate now into your role at SEDNA? Because I know there's a lot of things that SEDNA are trying to achieve, and it'd be really good to sort of understand how you do this and what SEDNA have achieved to date as well.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that kind of had to fit together to bring us today where we are with SEDNA. Yep. And I think if I take a step back, you know, I transitioned that kind of love for putting things together into my first job, which wasn't maritime, it was consulting. Yep. So I was working for Arthur Andersen. I was working on projects for General Motors and doing PeopleSoft implementation. Again, building, understanding requirements, building systems, implementing them, working to solve to a customer specification. Now, after leaving Andersen, I actually joined a tiny startup in Atlanta. I'm from Georgia, joined a tiny startup called Intercontinental Exchange. And now it's a global behemoth known as the ICE. And that was kind of my first foray into global trade, right? At ICE, we were working on the democratization of trading, taking traders from an open outcry pit to a screen. And once you get that bug, right, that startup bug, that solving for technological challenges, it's hard to get away from. So I left the trading side to go to SDocs, where I was working in physical operations for the first time. So really going on board the vessels, understanding how that process works, looking at barges, the barge market, how we can bring digitalization there. And the real innovation that I got stuck on there was the electronic bill of lading. With an EBL, right, you can accomplish in moments what folks have been doing for 1,000 years by sending a paper document around the world by plane, right, by hand. So those two pieces were central to setting us up for success when I moved into the role at SEDNA. SEDNA, the relationships that I've had here have been going back 20 years in both of those roles. Actually, I met our founder, Bill Doby, when I had just started at ICE, and he was still selling NAP.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We worked together at SDocs when he was consulting on our product for a while. So when he showed me what he had pulled together at SEDNA, I think it was within 5 minutes of seeing the system, I said, everyone I know needs this. Right? I can change people's day for the better. And so to that point, I probably should have mentioned this beforehand. What is SEDNA? Right? I think probably your listeners are thinking, what in the world is talking about? What is SEDNA? So let me take a step back.
No problem.
SEDNA is better email. SEDNA is better email. I mean, in a nutshell, that's how I tell my grandmother about it. If you think about the innovation we've seen across trading, across electronic bills of lading, electronic nominations, etc., everything except your inbox has changed over the past 4 years.
Yep, that's so true.
And, we had the wave of blockchain a couple of years ago, and people started to say, oh, your email is dead, right? We don't need email anymore. We're working towards a different line of communication. Well, SEDNA doubled down, and we said, actually, no, email is the communication backbone of global trade. And we can simply do better on it. And our core function is related to connectivity with other systems in your tech stack, with other core systems of record, in order to improve the email experience.
I mean, I totally agree. It's such a great system. I mean, my background is commercial maritime. So I started off as a tanker operator. We were just using traditional email. Like there was the volume of emails that were coming through were crazy. The day-to-day, you mentioned about electronic bill of lading as well, which to say you have like a physical bill of lading that was getting flown around the world just sounds ludicrous. If you explain it to anyone outside the maritime industry, they think you're stuck in the dark ages. Yeah. So I think your background with that and understanding hands-on maritime as well, which I know Bill's got a great understanding for as well. SEDNA just offers such a great solution to that high volume email. I mean, to find out which emails are most actionable is so valuable for especially someone with any type of operation backgrounds. I think anyone looking at SEDNA for the first time think, why wasn't this done 20 years ago? And I just think it's such a great solution. But yeah, and also ICE, you mentioned about ICE. That again is something where I used to work at Clarkson's. They only introduced that probably 6 or 7 years ago. And again, before that, I think we were just trying to do everything on like a mobile phone or calling people all the time, which is obviously the voice element of their things are still really essential. But now in this day and age, just everything is either on email or chat platform. So I think what SEDNA doing is great.
Well, you bring up a really good point. You mentioned volume, right? Yeah. Not everyone has a problem with their inbox. There are plenty of industries where Outlook or Gmail, it works just fine, but ours is unique, we have to say, right? We have that volume challenge. And I think that's what's really critical. But also think about the shape of your team. You've been on the other side of that inbox, right? Think about the shape of the team and the folks you hire. They're not, well, let's just put it this way. They're expensive resources, right? Yeah. And you hired them for their focus and attention to solving problems, to making and creating commercial opportunities for the organization, not for admin. And, I've met folks, Daniel, who think they are successful because they're good at foldering emails, right? And I love to show them how they can be so much more successful if they don't have to waste their time doing that.
as I think just working as collaboratively as well, especially within, I don't keep coming back to operations, but it's just that's my background. So
Yeah.
there'll be times when it's a 24/7 industry, you've got to have access to your emails all the time, but you've got to be on top of things all the time. But also in different companies, things are structured different ways. So people will cover for people over the weekends or when people go on holiday, and having that access the way you make it more of a team access to emails as well is so much easier rather than receiving countless irrelevant emails if you open up your inbox to everyone, but at the same time missing things if you only have it going to one operator or one charter or anything like that. So the way SEDNA's platform works, I think, is great for integration within the team.
You're exactly right. This is business team information that we're dealing with. It shouldn't be siloed in a single person's inbox, right? We're all working together here. Let's do that together more effectively. And so that, again, is one of the key tenets of SEDNA, is that collaboration aspect. I always use the example of, you could guarantee in my last job, it'd be a Thursday night. You know what we do in London on a Thursday after work. We go to the pub, right? And you can bet I would be asking for that first glass of wine. And before it could be in my hand, I'd have a captain calling me, asking me for a barge receipt or nomination as the load port changed. And think about what we used to do when you were stuck on Outlook. Maybe you had your laptop, maybe you didn't, maybe you had to log in via the VPN. But, in that moment, you just are looking for data, and your inbox is your biggest source of untapped data, right? So what we're doing is elevating those pearls to immediately. So you have accessibility to all emails, all documents for all time, even on your mobile phone, right? And that's why I really saw the opportunity for change, just within both for the individual, the team, and the organization.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the best solutions I've ever seen, and I wish I had it when I was working in operations.
That's my life. You can just tell all your friends now.
It would have made my life a lot less stressful, put it that way. Okay, I think obviously there's a lot of digital challenges still within the maritime industry. But one of the other things I wanted to address with having you on the show today is that we've actually got the International Day of Women in Maritime coming up on the 18th of May. And what I'm curious to learn is what that really means to you as a woman in maritime and digital maritime.
Yes. I mean, I think, listen, everyone who works in this business, regardless of who you are, you know how hard we all work, right? But we do it because we love it. It's rewarding. I think in particular, this day is just our opportunity to focus and reflect on the key role of women, right? And dedicating ourselves or rededicating ourselves to women and females' advancement in this space. Now, diversity, right? It's crucial for our industry. It's crucial to our organization to be ultimately successful. We need different perspectives. We need different backgrounds. We need different skill sets. And women are just one component in that. But this is our opportunity to double down on that, make our commitments, and start to make action points to increasing that diversity. Because at the end of the day, I think they say it's only 1.2% of our industry is female. And that is, to me, a great opportunity to make improvement.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, when I was working in commercial maritime, I mean, that was a very male-dominated area. I mean, we did have a few women on the desk as well, but traditionally males that were in that space. And I don't know if that is something that was off-putting to women maybe looking at the career, is that it was so male-dominated. But what do you think we could do to maybe entice more women to come into shipping or the digital shipping space?
It's a real goal for me personally. It's certainly a goal for SEDNA as an organization overall. I think there's two key components to that. One is we have to advocate, and second, we have to demonstrate. And if I think about what does that mean, we have to use our voice, but we also have to convert that to action. And you were just talking about your own desk, right? Very male dominated. I look around the organizations that I go into when we're selling SEDNA, and it is still very male dominant. We want, particularly within SEDNA, we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but we have converted that into a commitment because we want that diversity within our organization. Secondly, we have to let people know that there is a space for them in maritime. think about the global supply chain. Think about the realm of technology and service providers backing that up. And there are so many opportunities. And so it's about letting younger generations know this, right? A lot of us were taught I wanted to be a neurosurgeon when I grew up, right? Make my parents proud. I would be a doctor. We hear about lawyers, doctors, veterinarians. I didn't grow up thinking I wanted to sell SaaS services or digitize maritime trade or fix email. But you can guarantee, I talk to my kids about that. They know what mommy does. They know what opportunities are out there. And so advocating for your position, but also you've got to be more visible as well. And I take it on my shoulders. Talking to you today, Daniel, it's not my favorite thing to put myself forward and speak in front of an audience. But you can guarantee, as I've matured into this role, I lean into that hesitation in order so that the next generation see there is a place for themselves in this business, in technology, in maritime, doing outreach at networking events, conferences in particular. I've been doing a lot of conferences recently. Yep. When I attend a conference from years back, you see the same men on the same panels, giving the same speeches. And now when I am invited to attend, I say, listen, I'd like to represent on one of those panels, or I'd like another member of our staff. You want to see that diversity in where you are attending, and you have to drive your attendance on that fact. So I think putting yourself forward, even when it's a little bit uncomfortable, in order to represent what you would like to see in the future.
That's great. I really admire that. It takes a lot of courage and willpower to do that. So I think that's great that you're taking that on board. You're very conscious of what you're trying to achieve as well.
Right.
I think from our side as recruiters, we are seeing an increase in women coming into the maritime space. But I think, it's something where you need to make people feel comfortable. Yep. And I think what SEDNA are so good at as well is advertising yourself on digital platforms such as LinkedIn or websites, or like we say at the events when we meet each other.
Yes.
Everyone that I've met, everyone makes everyone feel so comfortable. And it's such a people industry that if you can start doing that and make people aware of the opportunities, but also aware of the environment that these companies are like and how they are innovating and changing, then hopefully that will draw more diversity into the industry.
Absolutely.
So I think we're heading in the right direction. And maybe it's taking a little bit longer than some other industries, but we are heading there. And I think especially the digital space may capture even more youth, like young people coming into the industry as well. It's a new string to the bow and probably makes maritime a little bit more exciting for the younger generation.
It does. And that's a really good point. SEDNA, we've opened up internships to bring younger people into the organization in particular. But I've been quite impressed with the recent string of conferences that I've been attending with their outreach to young people in the community. So they're generally holding a session early on in the first day or a pre-session where they're inviting younger people in, university students as well, and they're interacting with the conference attendees. What a great example, right, that they're setting. What an opportunity to start forming connections, start seeing yourself in that industry, right, and having, kind of a baby step into what might become your career.
That's brilliant, because I say it's closed off in a way. If some people don't know about the industry, that's how do we start? How do we actually understand anything about this space? So anything like that is going to be so helpful. So Cynthia, really enjoyed having you on the podcast. I think what would be nice on that personable front is a question we ask some of our guests is a bit more personal. So maybe if there's anything that you have that you could share with our audience that most people don't know about you, whether it's a hobby or a personal achievement, I just think it's good to give a little bit more of that human side to it.
Oh, goodness. Something people probably don't know about me. I am an avid crafter.
Okay.
So I moved over to London as an expat with ICE in 2005. I stayed in London until I met my husband. He's a farmer in the countryside until 2014. Okay. And so when I moved to the countryside, I was kind of the most exotic thing they'd seen in my tiny village in Devon. And so I was trying to figure out how to make some friends and I decided to host weekly craft nights in my home. So I've taught most of our village how to crochet and knit and cross stitch. And yeah, I spend a lot of time on an airplane. So I do an awful lot of crafting while I'm en route. So yeah, I guess a lot of people don't know that about me.
I guess that shows your creative side, and again, it sort of links into the problem solving and innovating. That's a great. Obviously, you're in the right spot for all of that. So,
well, thanks. Thank you, Daniel. It's been really nice talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Cynthia. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Fantastic. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Maritime Software Hub. Before we go, I just want to give you a quick overview of our core business, which is recruitment. Cordell Beaumont was founded in 2019. Myself and my colleague Daniel are both ex-shipbrokers, and between us we have around 13 or 14 years of recruitment and talent acquisition experience. So we really kind of focus our team on the maritime software space and its kind of associated markets. So that could be kind of supply chain, might be satellite communication areas which relate to maritime. And we help companies hire. So predominantly that could be across the sales space, so software sales, data subscription sales professionals, and also marketing, product management, and some more technical focused positions. So we really are kind of very tapped into the evolving and growing market across the digital shipping space. We really pride ourselves on being very, very niche and enjoy forging kind of real interesting and lasting relationships with our candidate and client base. So the majority of the time we're predominantly speaking to people that aren't really active in the market. They might be already in a role and enjoying themselves and not necessarily looking, but we like to keep in touch with those sort of profiles, and in case a good opportunity comes along, we're the ones they go to ideally when something comes along. So if your team or anyone within your network might be looking for a career change, or perhaps you're thinking of expanding your team and hiring, please do reach out. The easiest email is info@cordellbeaumont.com. Alternatively, if you're interested in the podcast and you think it could help your business perhaps get some exposure, or you just like to kind of be featured and tell us a bit more about your background and the role you do, please feel free to reach out. Love to hear from you. The email is podcast@cordellbeaumont.com. Till next time, thank you very much.